he's a huge movie fan. He's a guy that watches movies not only throughout, but just, you know, with the boring commentaries from the director. So he loves movies, and he has a lot to say about any movie you probably can think of. His favorite actor, which one was it? He has quite a them here. Yes, Gary Oldman. You probably know him. Commissioner Gordon from Batman and Sirius Black. Wonderful actor. But most important, he's a really awesome guy, and he'll be talking about progressive apps. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Christian Heilmann. Give a round of applause.
I like that the announcement that is like Gary Oldman is like Commissioner Gordon, and he's also a Sirius Black, and he knows a lot about PWAs. I didn't know that Gary Oldman did that, but I mean, he's versatile enough, you never know. So I want to set you up today at this conference talking about progressive web apps, because there's going to be a lot of talks about progressive web apps, using Firebase to do them, using React to do them, all the technicalities of it. But I wanted you to remember and go a bit down a trip memory lane where we came from and why this is an exciting time to be a JavaScript developer, and why our skills and your skills are now very much needed for the market. I did these slides together. That's why I listed him with my colleague Aaron Gustafsson, because he knows how to make beautiful slides. I know how to talk about things. So I basically stole a lot of his slides and changed them around, and he doesn't know yet what I did to them either, so that's going to be an interesting thing for him. Now, what is a PWA? What is an app? This is a great application that I'm using a lot, and it's actually an expense manager. So on the go, when I spend other people's money, it's good to have receipts to actually make sure that they're paying me. And this is what it looks like on a mobile phone. And you can scan like receipts, and it automatically OCRs them for you and finds these things. But the same application looks like this on a desktop. And that makes total sense. The biggest problem that we have is that when we switch from one context to another, from a mobile phone to a desktop, we normally don't give people more functionality, and it makes no sense. You know, having a button that's like 6,000 pixels wide on my desktop is not a good experience. But having an experience like that, where it becomes much richer on a mobile, on a desktop machine than on a mobile phone, this is exactly what we should be doing. This is exactly how an application on the web, or any application, should be. They should adapt to the environment and give the users the best experience in that environment, not only one experience that is everywhere. Remember when the first iPhone came out, and then we had like jQuery UI that made everything look like iOS 1? And on an Android phone, it made no sense whatsoever, because the buttons look completely different. This is the mistake that we did with that. So when you think about progressive web apps, and when you think about the future ahead right now, or the current way of building things, think this way. And this is the interesting thing about this one is it's actually it's not an app. It's just running in the browser. This is just an HTML document with JavaScript and CSS that adapts itself to the environment that it runs in. And weirdly enough, this is what the web was built for. But we forgot about that. We keep trying to control the web. We keep trying to tell people what browsers to use, what operating system to use, what mobile phone to use. And this is not up to for us to do. We are there to deliver content to end users, to allow people to consume things on the web and to do things with the web. If that means much more hardship for us, guess what? That's what we get paid for. You know, you're not getting paid for having fun, like that's only me. Other people actually have to do something for their money, and that's the interesting bit about it. So our end users are the people who make our money. They click on ads, they actually pay for our software, so make sure that they have a good experience. Now, progressive web apps are the hot new shit. They're basically the most amazing thing that you see right now. Every conference is about progressive web apps. There's lots of resources for it. And there's lots of events, tools, ideas, and great documentation. But there's also a few misconceptions, because every time we have a hype, we start falling into the same trap. That when something new comes around, we always think like we have to do something new to build it, right? We have to find a new language, we have to find a new paradigm, we have to build a new editor, a new tool chain, we have to do something completely new for it. And the great thing about PWAs is that we don't have to do that. Because the concept of a progressive web app is kind of a cool thing to say, But it could be anything. It doesn't have to be an app. It doesn't have to be a single-page application. It doesn't have to use the coolest, newest framework. It could be a game. It could be a gallery. It could be a book, a newspaper, an art project, or a tool. All of these things can become progressive web apps, because the concept of progressive web app is just packaging it up in a certain way so people can use them and with subsequent visits get better results. So we could have called it a progressive website, but that is not as cool. You know, because websites, like, oh, we have done that. We call it everything has to be an app. End users or clients come up to us nowadays and say, like, I don't want to have a website, I want to have an app, because my competition has an app. And it makes sense to download 50 megs for like 10K of data. So we needed to call it progressive web apps to get people more excited about it. But in essence, it's just a website that has been promoted to being native-ish, to be like a bit like an app and have all the functionality of an app. Because when it comes to the mobile space, or when it comes to the tablet space, or the touch interface space, being appish makes more sense than having to find like a little button to click, or follow links around all the time, or actually use the navigation of your browser. The browser is not available in most of these interfaces, so let's not rely on back buttons or home buttons or print buttons. It's similar to a hosted web app. Hosted web apps have been around for a long, long time. We used HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, packaged it up, and then created a native app from it. And it didn't quite work as much as we thought to be. So web as native is not a new concept. Like putting something into a web view and then packaging it up and shipping it out as an app has been around for a long, long time. Remember Adobe Air? I know, it pains, it's hard to remember, but it really was there. And it was the first time that we had an app that was written in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, packaged up to be a natively installed app on different operating systems. Then we had WebOS, then we had Windows 8, which, let's forget about it. And then we had Firefox OS, we had the Chrome embedded framework, and we had lots and lots and lots and lots of other ones as well. We had like Accelerator, we have Electron now, we've got Ionic, we had Windows 8.1, and these kind of things. All of these things did the same thing. They packaged up HTML content as an application and hoped people loved it. And they didn't. And the question was, why? Why didn't it work? I mean, it makes so much sense to have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as the stack, because it's so easy to edit, it's so easy to build, it's so easy to teach new developers to actually build things with you. That's what the power of the web is. And also the other power of the web is, of course, the link. To send a link to somebody and install something with that is much better than sending somebody to an app store which asks for your firstborn, a credit card, a pint of blood, and something else before you can actually download the first application. So why didn't it work? The first one was insufficient web capabilities. By design or by not being there right now, it was really hard from HTML to use the cool new stuff that a mobile phone had, like a camera, an accelerometer, access to the current location on the planet. These things were not available on all the mobile platforms for HTML content, and this was a real problem. The other problem was OS lockout of web content. Like iOS and others did not see the web outside of WebKit to be something that they would trust. JavaScript didn't have access to the things that native applications had access to, and that was the same on the first Androids, but we've come a long way since then, and it's much better. The other thing was insufficient hardware. Firefox OS was incredible. It was a wonderful, great idea, and nobody liked the phones. That's a problem, of course, if you build something that nobody wants to use. Like when we built Firefox OS, the first thing we said, like, it's going to be markets where people like texting. If your keyboard, your on-screen keyboard, is not responsive, that's not good for texting. So people didn't like it. People didn't need it. So you need to package it up with a nice hardware to build things to sell an operating system as well. And we didn't quite define what a web app is. We just said, oh, it's a web app now. What is a web app? Oh, it's a web app exactly what iOS does, but in a shittier way. This is what we build most of the time. So now we actually thought, okay, that's the first thing we should do. We should start thinking about what is an app and why should it work now? Why should PWAs not be the same flash in the pan, no pun intended, that the other package systems were? Well, the first is browser support. Browsers do not suck any longer. Browsers are evergreen. Browsers are available for us to file bugs against. Browsers are available for us to file enhancements against. We need your feedback in browsers, and the browsers are updating constantly anymore. We're not at the problem where you buy a mobile phone, where the browser's already 3 years outdated by the time you buy the mobile phone. So if you look at what the web can do today, this one shows you all the things that your current browser that you're using can use, and it links you through all the standards that are available that browsers can do. So you don't need a native environment anymore to do that. The next big step why it will work today is that there's no dedicated hardware OS. We realized that iOS and Android are the winners. There's sadly enough no space for a third player in the mobile space, it seems. WebOS failed, Ubuntu failed, Firefox OS failed. Microsoft Mobile is not used outside of Germany and Poland either. And it's just weird that there's only 2 players there, but we realize that now. And instead of trying to build another a player in there, another operating system, we realize this has to work on Android, this has to work on iOS, basically the machines that people already have. And we know now what we're building instead of copying what other people do. That's a big step ahead, that we're out of a sudden, instead of like, oh my God, native is going to kill the web. No, web is better than native. Let me show you why. This is how we defined what PWAs are about. So the PWA principles. A PWA is first of all progressive. It's responsive, it's network independent, it's app-like, and it's fresh. It's safe, it's discoverable, it's re-engageable, if that's even a word. It's installable, and it's linkable. And I'm going to go through them in terms of what that means for us to do. What it means for us to build something as amazing as this. Because these are the things you need to cover, otherwise you can't call it a PWA. There's a big marketing hype going around right now that everybody calls something a PWA. That's my dog, it's also a PWA. Don't trust that, that's a lie. So, what is the difference between PWA and native? This is Twitter and Twitter Lite next to each other. The functionality is more or less the same. It doesn't do all the things the same way, and that's totally fine. That's like us testing across different browsers and wondering why there's differences. Here is a little secret: no end user does this. The same way when we do responsive design and keep resizing the viewport, no end user ever does this. We're actually testing the wrong way. If the thing in that environment works perfectly the way it's supposed to do, people can do the things that they came for, then that's fine. And I've been using Twitter Lite for half a year now, since it came out. I completely ditched Twitter because I was tired of every update of Twitter being a 50 meg download while I'm on the road. This makes no friggin' sense. They just changed the icons around. Why should I download 50 meg of data every single time when there's a new functionality? It doesn't do the same things that the native one does. But you know what? I don't miss it. I really don't care, because now my data traffic it's a quarter of the data traffic I had before, which when you're on roaming in other countries is very, very important to you. And also, I have more space on my mobile phone now. I got a really fancy mobile phone, but I got 2 SIM cards in it because I got a UK one and an international one, so I couldn't put a SD card in it, so I only have 5 gig in the whole phone. Only 5 gig. I thought if you had told me that 10 years ago, you'd be like crazy. But this, I always had to delete apps all the time because things were full. And with Twitter Lite now, out of a sudden, Twitter takes about 1/10 of the data that it used before, and this is great. The web is inherently not secure. That's the first thing that we need to fix. If your stuff runs on HTTP, there is a man-in-the-middle attack waiting for you. There's a proxy in between pretending to be your site. I don't know if really your domain is your domain if it's not on a secure environment. So the first thing to do when you build a PWA is have a safe server. Well, that's a good idea anyways, but have a safe resource. HTTPS or HTTP2 is a mandatory thing to sort out before you can call it a PWA. This has become much easier with like let'sencrypt.org that's supported by Mozilla, or even hosting on GitHub is already a way to get an HTTPS resource. Localhost is exempt of that, so if you run that locally, you're always in that space already. But don't put a localhost live, because that's a really bad idea. A PWA needs to be served from a secure origin to ensure you support HTTPS or HTTP2. Otherwise, you don't get the functionality that we actually want to give you, because we cannot allow any website on the internet to access your payment data. We cannot allow any website on the internet to access your address book or your current location and these things. These are very important details that nobody should be able to sniff, so it needs to be a secure environment. A PWA needs to have an app manifest, so user agents know about the requirements of your application and give access to the needed APIs and features. This is just a JSON file, and it's just a name, a short name, the icons, start URL, display orientation, background color, and theme color. So these are the things that you define in your manifest, and out of a sudden the browser knows, a search engine knows, a packaging system knows, hey, this is an app. This is not just a website that wants to show stuff. Design and performance considerations. It needs to be progressive, responsive, and app-like. What does that mean? Well, progressive enhancement is an old idea, and I've been banging on about that for years and years. It's basically thinking about the core purpose and tasks. What does your app need to do for everyone? In this case, in Twitter's case, send tweets. Duh. So it's like 114 characters, being able to put that into a text box and send a button off to send it to the Twitter API to post it to Twitter. The other stuff, like posting videos, posting images, having a GIF keyboard, having all the cool features of like your location and stuff, these are all nice to haves. So think about the main purpose of your app and build that independent of anything that you might think of. And then you branch out to make it prettier, to make it better, to make it easier for people to use. This is what progressive enhancement is about. It's not about JavaScript being available or not. It means about what is the main thing people come to do, and let's make sure that neither technological restrictions nor barriers to access make people not being able to use your stuff. This is what you should think about. What is the main use case that people get out of it? You turn off JavaScript, you use a really old browser, you go to google.com, you get a search box, and you get a search result list. Because that's what you came for, and that's what Google makes money with. So this will always work. The fancy image previews and video previews and these kind of things, they're just nice to have. So think about that when you do your PWA as well. The experience and the capabilities should be like this. The more capabilities the environment of the end user has, like a proper browser, a fast connection, a nice big screen, the better the experience should become. As you've seen in the first example, if I got a big screen, I get more information in my expense system than just typing in my expenses. Progressive enhancement ensures people can use your product no matter what. And this is a very, very important thing to do. And that is the same for PWAs. PWAs are not set in stone. They're not like you need to use Chrome and the newest Android to have a PWA. When you've done that, we're going back to the same mistake we did before with Air, we did with WebOS and with the other systems. It doesn't need to be a certain environment for a PWA. It needs to be your content for your end users in their environment. Allow users to do what they came for and reach what they want to reach. This is what a PWA means. And don't demand of your users to change their device. That's just not happening. People are not going to buy an extra iPhone just because your website doesn't work on Android. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Reach people where they are and don't ask them to cater to you. The next thing PWAs need to fix is network access and notifications. Notifications are incredibly important. When you talk to any app developer, having a notification telling you something changed, come back to the app, or something changed, do you want to act on it on the notification itself, is the best way to get your users to use your application over and over again. I'm kind of worried about notifications becoming the new pop-ups. There's so many websites that you go right now and you're like, do you want the loudest website to send you notifications before you even read it? You know, like, buy me some wine first, you know, like, or take me out for dinner. This is like, don't ask me to actually pester me every 20 seconds, although I don't know who you are. This is what people are doing right now. So a notification should always be an opt-in. You should be like, okay, you've liked this website, you can turn on notifications here, by the way, and not just a forced pop-up at first time when you load the page. So a PWA is network independent, fresh, and re-engageable. So network independent is an important bit. If you're offline all the time, but that's okay. Offline, online is a simple state. Flaky online is the real issue that we have. where you go through a 3G connection in some side streets, then you have an H connection in the other, and out of a sudden you're on Edge, and the upload of your photo is not happening any longer. So you should always trust the network to be not there. It's a very, very fickle friend. It's very, very unreliable. So make sure that your application stands up to changing networking conditions and not expect people to be on wireless all the time and be on a fast connection all the time. Your content needs to be fresh, like an app that basically stays the same all the time, and an app that doesn't update when new information comes in is very broken to me. Why should I have an app if I have to hit a refresh button all the time? I might as well have a website then where I need to do that anyways. And the re-engageability thing is a very, very important part, that you get people back into your application. The naming of your notifications is one of the biggest UX things we have to fix right now. And notification telling you, please come back to me, where your app sounds like a very needy Tamagotchi, this is not the way to deal with end users. A notification should tell me what happened and what I can do about it. If that's not covered, then please don't send me a notification, because it's just an ad. That the notification should allow me to do something on the notification itself. And this is the cool thing about it as a PWA is independent of operating system. On iOS, on Android, on Windows, it does different things. The notifications are richer in some and less rich in others. Sometimes it's just a text message, and that's okay too. But it should only be sent when something happened that needs my attention, not that you want the user back at your application. Now, to make all this work, and there's going to be a detailed talk about this today, we got the service worker. The service worker is a proxy server that sits between web apps, the browser, and the network. So in essence, it's a scriptable HTTP proxy in JavaScript. And how cool is that? Of course, that also sets the barrier of becoming a JavaScript developer much higher than before. You need to understand what networking means. You need to understand what caching means. The good thing is you define the rules what should be cached and loaded from where. There's no more hoping that the browser caches your work. The amount of times when we basically hope that the browser cached it and we never knew, we don't know when the browser is clearing its cache when it's full. But in a service worker environment, you name the cache, you seed it, you delete it, you update it, you're in control, reliably sending the user what they need to have. You can intercept network requests and define what happens. That means you can do offline, you can do caching, you can do refreshing, converting before display. So a good use for service workers, for example, converting images to formats that the environment supports that are much smaller than the other ones. People use service worker for that already. And it refreshes your app in the background, and it pulls new content and notifies the user with push notification that something new is available. When Twitter just changed their look and feel, which caused a lot of dismay in people, and of course the world is ending because now our avatars are round, I didn't realize it at all. I just opened my Twitter Lite and hey, it's round, cool. Yeah, what did people write about? I didn't even know that there was an update to Twitter. It was just immediately there because it loaded in the background, it updated in the background. Next time I started it, the new functionality was there. This is what fresh means. Service worker has good support, but you need to detect the support, but you can just do it with Navigator Service Worker. And if your user's device doesn't support it, you need to fall back to a push service. And we're going to have talks about that later today. There's all kinds of services that you can use, Firebase being the big one that everybody talks about right now. This is mostly important right now for iOS because reasons and Apple. So discoverability, upgrade, and access considerations of PWAs. So PWA needs to be discoverable, installable, and linkable. So you need to find the thing. You need to be able to install it, so you don't ever go back to the browser afterwards. And linkable, because you want the link to be the distribution model of applications with PWAs. And this is so friggin' cool, because you can send anything to people to get your stuff installed. So how does a user discover a progressive web app? Well, they go and actually have a news item or an article or a blog post or a bot or an email or a message or a poster or an NFC beacon or a movie product placement or a dog collar, whatever. Anything that can be a link can be your distribution model. And these are all free. These are all cheap and simple to do. These are not listing in a marketplace and then paying the company to be the first listed app in their marketplace. Once you have that, people follow the link. Then actually the HTML loads, the JavaScript executes, the service worker runs, and magic happens. And out of a sudden, you have a PWA. And subsequent loads of the PWA offer more functionality, and you can ask for more permissions. That is a biggie. Like, remember when every puzzle game asked you for access to everything on your mobile phone because there was no way later on to change that in a native environment? When you needed to define upfront what you need access to. With PWAs, I can basically ask you for nothing. And then the second time you go to it and you want to take a picture, you select, do you want to allow this app to access your camera? Sure. Why should I write my own JavaScript code to access the camera when every device already has a photo app installed? I don't need to do this functionality anymore. All I need to do is ask the user for permission to use their camera. If the user says no, no pictures for you. You chose that. That was your decision. I can't force that functionality on you because it's you in control. So a PWA is a proper try before you buy. You install the application by visiting it and granting it more permissions in more visits. So the first time you go there, it's like, hey, this is cool, and it's already installed. I mean, how amazing is that? As soon as the service worker kicks in, I can start loading my caches, I can start putting content in there, and the next time the user opens the same URL, oh, by the way, I'm working offline now. Thanks. I hope that's okay with you. If not, you can delete me. But I gave you that functionality for free because you visited me. And how great is it to install something by visiting a link and delete it when you don't like it? You don't go through the whole step of like, going to the store, forgetting your credit card detail, finding other credit card details to type in, and so on and so forth. Like 73% of users are lost in that whole process. We lose our users by making it too hard for them to install our software, and a link is much, much easier for doing that. Updates happen in the background. That's a huge improvement over native apps. I don't get the like, every time I go back to my wireless, my mobile phone tells me there's 73 apps that have updates. Do you want to download them? I don't, but okay, I have to, because security and all kind of things and like new features and whatever. But it's just, it's baffling to me that in 2017, we went back to the world where we had to get a new CD and put the software in again. I talked about that 2 years ago, that apps to me, the way we built them, are the biggest step back in software distribution in 20 years. We made sure that that software became a consumable product. When your DVD of Office was scratched, you had to buy a new DVD. When your app basically doesn't have many users anymore, and we want to make a new one, we make Angry Birds 2, Angry Birds 5, Angry Birds 6, and we don't make it compatible with the old one. You have to buy the new one. It's pure consumerism what apps became, and that's a very bad way of distributing any software. So updates should happen while I'm away. Make sure that next time I'm coming, hey, oh cool, there's new functionality. I didn't have to do anything because of that. This is great. What about users who don't trust links but want a store experience? Yes, they exist. I know people that only use iOS, that only use Windows, and never want to follow a link and don't even know how to install something with a link. They just go to the store to find information and find apps. This is the great model that iOS came up with to bring millions of users that hate computers to computers. And we shouldn't be poo-pooing that. It's just a new way of reaching more people. So app manifests are just another resource on the web. They're a JSON file. They're a text file. So what can you do with them? You can index and ingest them with search engines and stores. So instead of you having to go to the marketplace and tell the marketplace, hey, here's my app, or a search engine, hey, here's my app, please list that as an app rather than as a website, as soon as you have a manifest, we can do that. This is already happening in the Windows Store and in Bing. Bing is a search engine. You can Google for that in case you don't know it. You have a flag up here where you can actually see the app in the search results as an app with their reviews and everything, and a massive install button that actually allows you to go directly and install that application without even going to the website. The same way in the store, it lists this just like another app. It doesn't tell you that it's a PWA because end users do not give a shit what the technology of that app is as long as it works. This is kind of weird to see that, to bring PWAs back to a store, but this is a great way to reach users that you haven't thought of and you never would reach otherwise. So you can actively submit that to the store, or you can passively ingest them. So you need to do nothing. We will just add your PWA automatically, but you can opt out with it. So as soon as you put a manifest.json on the web, it's already been indexed by Google and by Microsoft and probably other people soon as well. I don't know, I haven't caught up with Google what they did, but they said they're going to list it in the App Store, in the Android store quite soon as well. I don't know if that's already a case, the political thing most of the time. So what we do in Microsoft, because I'm working for them right now, so that's why I want to cover that quickly, because you probably haven't thought of that when you talk about PWAs. PWA is always a mobile game. Everyone's like, oh, it's Android, isn't it? It's Google. No. Everybody is on PWAs, and there's great opportunities for you. So we crawl and index PWAs, we convert them to APPX, that's the HTML format of Windows 10 that nobody should have to write. And then it's searchable and browsable in the store. So we do this conversion automatically for you. You don't need to understand what APPX means any longer, because it's yet another format of HTML as an app. If you don't want to do it, do your robots.txt saying bingbot, disallow manifest JSON. That still lists your app in Bing, but it doesn't show it up as an application, and it doesn't get it into the marketplace or in the store. Now the process is the passive process needs a quality control, because we took the web and we looked at manifests. We found 1.5 million manifests over 800,000 domains. The sad thing is most of them were rubbish. Most of them were generated from favicon generators, or they were like PWA demo examples on GitHub and these kind of things. So we had to find a way to qualify which ones are good enough for ingestion. So we said, okay, does the app manifest suggest quality? It's not a boilerplate app that's empty. It has a name, it has a proper description, and it has an icon over 192 pixels squared for some reason. Is the site secure? If it's not a secure interface, we're not ingesting your app because the reasons. Does the site have a valid service worker? Does the service worker kick in? Does it actually do some caching? Because otherwise it's just going to be another HTML app that isn't working offline properly and doesn't fulfill the flaky connectivity stuff that I talked about. Is the site popular? Alexa, Quantcast, etc., and so on and so forth. Does the site pass automated testing for quality? So there's a few automated testing facilities. Lighthouse by Google is the biggest one that everybody talks about. We also have one coming up called Sonar, which is going to be an open source project to test the quality of your applications with. And is the app content free? So we don't want people to make a PWA that is basically a fancy image and then says like, and now pay money to get our content. This is not what PWAs are about. You should have something there for people to do. As I said before, it's a thing that you send out for people to do stuff with. If everything costs money in your application, then go to an app store, because that's what they're actually for. Please don't go on the web. The same way, it pisses me off how some great apps show up in image search in Google, and then I click on them, and I never can reach that image. It's basically now download the app instead of the image that you already have in the background. So use developer tools to get rid of all the pop-ups on top of it, and then save the image and go like, haha, I got it. But this is terrible, that people use the web as an advertising platform to content that is not web available. Does the app pass manual review? Because we cannot just trust computers to say, oh, that's fine. We actually have to go through the description as well and understand that what you wrote in there makes total sense for the app. Now, in the store, the app manifest populates the entries. So the name is coming from the manifest, the description is coming from the manifest, and the icons are coming from the manifest as well. So you don't need to maintain that extra. You can edit later on and change it accordingly, but it's already in there for you. And this is quite useful for you to find out that now you can reach people where they are. And the screenshots are also part of the manifest, so this information is all coming from what you're doing anyways. So from a user's perspective, a PWA is just an app. They don't need to know that it's a PWA. They don't need to know that it's HTML and CSS and JavaScript. We made that mistake a lot. We like, oh, this is an HTML5 app, and then it actually performed badly compared to native apps, and people are like, okay, HTML5 is shit. I'm not going to use that anymore. Well, good luck. You will have to use it, but like it's really weird how we make our technology stack the advertising part of it. That makes no sense at all. Now, what do we have already? We have the Fetch API, we have a web app container, and the Windows Runtime APIs. That one gives you access to all kind of ingestion in the how to find the app on your machine itself later on as well. And we soon have the Service Worker, the Cache API, and the Push API as well. This one is now only available in Android and the latest Chrome fully. Firefox also does it, but there is no mobile game for Firefox other than Firefox on Android and Firefox on iOS, which is not Firefox. And on iOS, they're working on it. They got interested in it as well. The web app container is a standalone window. It's independent of the browser process, and that's really interesting because you don't want every PWA to be on the same process as your main Chrome or your main Firefox or your main Edge, because you don't want the PWA to take down your machine. I'm still a Firefox user as my main browser, and I realized 2 days ago switching to to Facebook as an app and not using Facebook in my Firefox made it about 80 times faster. It's unbelievable how one app can take down the rest of your browser. It's less overhead and isolated caching as well, so even if the cache of your application can get poisoned, it doesn't take over the operating system. It's nearly unlimited storage. You get IndexedDB, local storage, etc. Offline and background processes, and access to Windows runtime APIs like Calendar, Cortana, and Address Book, because that's what you want people to share things with as well. And of course, Cortana is also a good thing on when you have an environment like a HoloLens, where that's your main access to something, and that's pretty amazing that you can do that from JavaScript now. The best thing, though, is about PWAs, though, is that all the work you put into turning your product into a PWA helps the web. It's not hard to do a manifest file. It's not hard to define a service worker. Doesn't matter if it doesn't run on this old browser or that old environment. On the newest environments, the end users will get a much better experience, and you will have full control over the caching. You know where your information is. You know how to update your information. You're not at the beck and call of a browser doing it for you. You can simplify your products. You can slim them down. You can rethink your approach, and new users will enjoy your products. As I said, like, you probably don't care about mobile Windows App Store. I don't, but users are there and people are having it. We just released a new version of Windows where it's the main way to get applications. So having your application there front and center is probably not a bad idea. The same way it's not a bad idea to get your stuff listed on Android, to get your stuff listed in iOS. But with PWAs, you don't have the problem of being beholden to these markets. They can go in there automatically, or they can go in there later on if you want to. You don't have to start there. Now, PWAs are lower cost and time to build. Think about a native environment. The first thing you have to do is the App Store submission is largely required. So you build your app, and then you have to go to the web and you host it. You have to go to iPhone and iPad, and you have to submit it to the App Store and wait for 2 weeks. You go to Android phone, Android tablet, you have to submit it to the Play Store, and you don't wait, but you probably have to rethink some of the ways you've done. You go to Windows, you submit it to the Windows Store, and you go to Mac OS, you submit it to the Mac Store. This is all overhead. This is not the time where you have the time to deal with feedback from your users. This is not the time to do security fixes. Something that is broken should be able to immediately be fixed, not wait for 2 weeks and somebody to tell you now it's okay to fix that data leak that your end users have to suffer from. Now, on PWAs, you have your app core that you build, you push it on the web, you host it, and the rest of it comes for free. Because the good thing about PWAs, and we're going to see about Ionic about this later, a talk, is you can convert them into native apps easily because you're coming from an open format. You cannot convert an iOS app easier to an Android app. You have to have a Java development team and a Swift development team. With a PWA, you have a web development team that then uses something like Manifold.js or PWA Builder or Ionic or Electron, whatever you want to use to host that stuff and make it a natively installable application on the platforms that don't support PWAs yet. So this is the big gain that you have from PWAs. As I said, your biggest barrier to people using your stuff is the app market submissions and them finding it in the app market. You don't want to be in competition to be the top 10 inside iOS store. That's only 2% of the market. I don't have the number right now, but I love that there was over 60% of the App Store on Android have never been downloaded. Those apps are just there, and people hope that end users find them, and they never found them because there's too much barrier, there's too much advertising, there's too much fake things going on. The new SEO is basically paying people to write reviews in app stores for you. Great app, a wonderful app. Didn't work, but fine. It's still a great app, and I loved it because people paid me to write something good about it. The PWA approach fixes the worst problems of native apps and brings the best of the web to the app space. And today you're going to hear all about that from other speakers in detail. There's lots of documentation how to find out how to build your first PWA. And as I said, it's no loss. Everything you do here benefits your application or your website or your web product. It just gives you a new functionality that's much more reliable than anything we've done before. And with that, open your mind today to build your first PWA when you come home, and I thank you very much.